Hi again then guys, and welcome to the third installment of my series of reviews covering different aspects of the current Gran Turismo Sport experience, of course on the PS4, using, for the moment at least, the closed beta test version. Now, we've already discussed physics, we've discussed handling, we've discussed the way the cars perform in general, we've discussed the menu layout, and the accessibility of the game, the tuning, that kind of thing. But although we have touched on this particular point, we haven't gone as in depth on this particular point that we're going into in this video as early or as much as you may expect. Because the thing that everybody talks about with new games, especially on next-gen consoles, is the graphics. Are the graphics good? Does the water look good? Do the reflections look good? Does the lighting look good? Does it look realistic, or does it look better than real life? Because I would say that that is the difference between Gran Turismo and some other games as well, and some of their other competitors. Because whereas some racing games strive to look better than real life in terms of vibrant colours and ridiculously good looking vehicles, I would say that stuff like Forza, for instance, has that pretty much on lock. Gran Turismo, on the other hand, has never really aimed for that. They've always aimed to be more accurate to real life, rather than trying to look better than it. So the colours are a little bit more dulled, there are more greys, darker colours, such as tarmac, the tracks in general, the railings of a track, and they don't try to make the track look better than real life, they try to be accurate to it. And that's fair enough. I can understand both points of view, and I certainly enjoy both points of view and both methods of producing and recreating cars and tracks for different reasons. But the question arises, fairly obviously, what about Gran Turismo Sport? What are the graphics like? Well, from the previous two videos, and I'm sure if you're watching my videos, you've probably watched others too, that you'll have seen your fair share of the graphics on Gran Turismo Sport, at least the beta version. And I'm sure you'll agree that for the most part, it offers what you'd expect from a Gran Turismo game. The cars look exactly like the real vehicles, if indeed they are real vehicles, some of them aren't, and the tracks look, at least from a distance, certainly good enough for a next-gen console. But let's go a little bit more in depth than that. How good does it really look once you look up close? Because just like a pixelated picture, if you look at a pixelated picture from a distance, it can look okay, but once you zoom in, it starts to look pretty bad. That is where the real superior graphics start to come into play, not just in the literal sense with pixelation, but as a metaphor. When you look closer at some games, when you look at the details, they can start to fall apart in terms of just how good the visual quality actually is. So the real question for Gran Turismo Sport is, does it hold up under closer scrutiny, or does it just look good on your initial viewing? Does it have that eye-catching factor which tends to bumfuzzle people and give them this rose-tinted view of the game? I've been accused certainly of having a rose-tinted view of the game, and that's wrong. I don't. I am one of the biggest proponents of arguing against methods that Polyphony uses. I have certainly attacked methods that they've used, along with the methods of many other racing games, including one of my most controversial opinions about Assetto Corsa in my video review for that game. But for GT Sport, I would say that my views and opinions on the graphics in particular are mixed. There are certain aspects of the graphics that are, I would say, superb. There are other aspects which are not necessarily bad, because, let's face it, bad is a strong word, and there is really no current generation game that has bad graphics, because any current generation game has better graphics than, say, a PS1 game or a Sega game, so bad is a very relative term. So a more accurate question is not, does Gran Turismo Sport have good or bad graphics? The real question is, are the graphics as expected, under par, or outstandingly good? Well, in certain ways I would say they're very good, in others not so much, as I mentioned. Now we're going to discuss some different types, some different elements, if you will, of graphics. Not just, oh, that car looks nice, all those colours are bright, oh, doesn't the sun look great as it bounces off the windshield and blinds you on Twin Ring Motegi. No, we're looking deeper than that. First of all, let's discuss the obvious point, The part which you pretty much have to get right, the cars. How do the cars look? Well, the cars are always the part of Gran Turismo that they've put the most effort into. Of course they want the cars to look fantastic, that's the whole point of the game. And I would say that Gran Turismo has always done an excellent job of having fantastic looking cars. That being said, it's not without its faults. Certain vehicles are still non-premiums, for instance on Gran Turismo 6. That's not acceptable. But that's something that Polyphony still does because people allow them to. If people boycotted sales, then maybe it would change. But no, people just buy the game anyway and then complain later. And then you complain again when nothing gets done and wonder why. But that's not something that you need to worry about on Gran Turismo Sport because there are no standard vehicles. Every vehicle in the game, and there are less vehicles in the game than previous Gran Turismo games, are full detailed cars. They have that fully detailed interior, inside and out they look fantastic. They are, as the name suggests, premium quality. Now from the outside, I would say that all of the cars that I've seen so far look fantastic, just as you'd expect them to. The race cars look crisp, the liveries look clean and detailed, the wings are very well shaped into the car, the proportions are fantastic, all that kind of good stuff that you'd expect from any Gran Turismo game. What about the interior? Because that is, as we mentioned, the way where Gran Turismo doesn't necessarily always do that well. Well, as far as interiors on this game go, I think that some cars are definitely better than others, which isn't necessarily surprising, but also in different ways. I would say that most of the race cars that I've driven so far don't look that amazing in the interior view. Not because they look bad or that they've been badly rendered, but just because the interiors are so simple and there's nothing going on. So most of the interior is just grey or black, flat, smooth surfaces, be it rubber, leather, carbon, whatever. And as such, there is quite simply less to work with in terms of detail and eye-catching design. That's not inaccurate, that's just the way the actual car looks. Now that being said, you could always put more detail into those cars to make them look even better, and there are certain aspects of the interiors of the cars on GT Sport which aren't that great. I would say they are under par. In particular, the edges of some of the smooth shapes, such as wing mirrors or even the steering wheel, you can actually see some of the slightly jagged edges where it's not quite smooth. That is worrying for a next generation game. You'd expect more than that. Now, that isn't something that's going to kill the experience for me. It's better than a black interior after all, but I'm hoping that they will iron that out by the time the game is released, because at the end of the day this is not a full game, no way near. So we'll have to wait and see as to what they do there. Maybe they'll release a demo down the line, but for now this is all I can say because this is all I have to work with. As far as things such as texturing, lighting, reflections, stuff like that goes, I would say that the game is very good for the most part. Again, some of the race car interiors don't give you a lot to work with, but the road cars, for instance, the Audi TT, which you can see me driving in this video, the Subaru Impreza as well, which I've driven in previous videos, and most of the road-going vehicles, the N300 cars, do have very good looking interiors. The way the light bounces off the HUD, it looks fantastic. It actually makes you unable to see the speedo for a fraction of a second, just like it would in real life. You get those reflections of the dashboard on the windshield, as I mentioned in the previous video as well. All of that kind of stuff looks great. I love the way that's integrated into the game. It makes it so much more realistic looking than say GT6 or even GT5 was, and overall I like that. It's carried out well, and it works well in the game. It's not buggy, at least in my experience, and it's smooth. It's more the case of the detail side of things rather than textures and lighting, which I have more issues with. And actually it's only with the interiors that I have that issue, as I mentioned just now, to do with the smoothness, or rather the jaggedness of the interior detailing, and even some of the exterior like the wing mirrors. That is disappointing. As far as the rest, I did like it. I love the implementation of the lighting, the reflections, that kind of thing. It's just the detail that doesn't feel quite finished. On the road cars though, the detailing is much better, which is interesting. That kind of puts a strange slant on it. Why don't the race cars look as good? Who knows? Maybe they're just not finished yet. What then about the environment? What does the track look like? Gran Turismo is kind of notorious for having bad-looking spectators that are just flat 2D shapes. The grass, for instance, doesn't necessarily look great. The trees, again, are just flat 2D shapes in the distance, and also, like most racing games, the distant parts of the track can sometimes have a tendency to just disappear once you drive far enough away, sometimes not even that far away. Well, Gran Turismo Sport is better in some ways and not worse, but not as good as you might hope in others. I would say the ways that it's better are actually similar to the ways that the cars look better, and that is lighting, texturing, and distant appeal. Looking at it from a distance, the new environments of the track, such as the Nürburgring Ring or Willow Springs, look fantastic. The distant vistas of the track, be it the new colour grading on the trees of the Nürburgring Ring, which looks so much better than it used to, the lighting of the sun bouncing off the track, all of that kind of stuff looks fantastic. But once you get up close, it doesn't get bad. It's certainly not GT2, GT3, GT4 old school graphics, but it's not what you'd expect from a PS4, PS4 Pro, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, the spectators are still kind of one-dimensional. They are more detailed than they used to be, for sure, but they do rotate on an invisible axis following your car. That's pretty dumb. I'm not aware of really any other current gen racing game, I'm sure there are some, but I can't think of any at the moment, that still do that. Gran Turismo still is on Gran Turismo Sport, and that is kind of weird and kind of disappointing. Now, that's not a deal breaker for me, it's not a game killer, but it's just things like that where you think, yeah, the car looks great, but maybe you could brush up some of this other stuff as well. At the end of the day, of course, they can't make the game perfect in every way, but you'd still expect more, considering how long the development of the game has been, and considering Gran Turismo, or Polyphony specifically, isn't exactly new to making games. They've been doing it for quite a while, so it's justifiable to have high expectations of them. Overall, I would say that the graphics in the game, as I mentioned early on in the video, are sometimes very good. I would say that the third-person view of the cars, the chase cam, looks great. The lighting is fantastic. From a distance, everything looks very good. And of course, the main menu vistas from Gran Turismo Scapes, where you can take photos of the cars, looks incredible. It looks photorealistic sometimes. But the environment graphics, the spectator graphics, the more low-level details, that's where it kind of falls short, at least at the moment. But overall, that's it for this particular aspect of my review of the game. And of course, if you haven't checked out my previous two parts in this review series covering different aspects of the game, you can click through to those videos at the end of this video. And also, there are extra videos about GT Sport down below in the description for you to check out if you fancy watching some extra GT Sport content as well. So as always, if you'd like to check out more GT Sport info, reviews, etc. over the coming days and weeks, of course you can follow the channel by clicking subscribe down below. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.